just turn down the
Good
volume.
afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to this edition of the RCB Radio Sports Show, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb.ie. So far, we've looked at the Senior Championship consisting of the three groups, and now our focus turns to the Intermediate Football Championship. And obviously, given that West Clare has numerous representatives in the Intermediate Championship as well, it's important that we give particular focus to this. And in terms of the Intermediate Championship, in Group 1, we have Kildysart, Michael Cusick's Liscannor and Kilfenora. So it's really some mouth-watering North Clare derbies in there, and obviously Kildysart, who have been thereabouts in the last few years. Group 2, we have beaten finalists and many people's favourites for the competition last year, many people's favourites again for the competition this year, Corfin. They're in with Naomh Eoin, Coolmeen and Wolf Tones. And Group 3, we've last year's semi-finalist Shannon Gales in with O'Curry's, Erogue, and the recently crowned only a week ago Junior A Football Championship champions, the Banner. But I'm going to start off with Group 1. Kildysart, Michael Cusick's, Liscannor and Kilfenora. And Seamus, if I can come to you first, the North Clare contingent in this, we're talking about derbies and the heated championship, but to get three teams with only a couple of miles between them and so much intensity, they're all joined up underage in terms of Clonlair. They all know each other very well. And there's going to be no love lost between Michael Cusick's Liscannor and Kilfenora. And we've Liscannor and Kilfenora meeting in the opening round at this weekend. And I'm finding this game very hard to call.
Yeah, it is very hard to call. I suppose you could say that both of them have struggled for a bit of form in recent times. Both would struggle numbers-wise. I think that has been a big problem, depopulation up in that area. And they would both have been struggling for numbers, and it's the only adult team that each of them have at the moment, which is, I suppose, another factor and will make it difficult. But look at its championship. Each one will seriously want to get one over on the other. They all know each other so well. They haven't featured maybe that often in recent times to any great level in terms of title winning, but that won't stop anything. There'll be a huge demand for tickets to see that game between the supporters of both sides. So it has the makings of a great contest. Now I know most pundits aren't predicting that either of them will have a major say in the competition this year. But whoever wins that battle on Sunday will put themselves in with a big shout to make it through to the playoffs. So there's a huge amount at stake. Keane O'Dea, we all know what he's capable of. He's captain of Kilfenora this year. Liscannor, I suppose since the glory days when they contested a couple of senior finals and the Cusick Cup final. Alan Clohessy is still a survivor from that team, and he's the backbone of their side. So there's a lot at stake, and it should be a great contest.
And James, if I can come to you as well in terms of, we know that Liscannor, Kilfenora, they're going with the same contingent for a while now in terms of player personnel. And then Michael Cusick's as well recently came up from the junior, shocked an awful lot of people last year, taking the scalp of Dora Bearfield in terms of running actually Dora Bearfield very, very close in terms of that intermediate sort of championship last year as well. So can you really see Michael Cusick's Liscannor and Kilfenora, any of the three sides really putting it up to Kildysart, or is it Kildysart and one then from the remaining three, do you think?
I probably agree with the latter, Jim, in that, Kildysart probably over the last, 5-6 years, they've been not knocking at the door, trying to make the breakthrough, but they've almost been there on a couple of different occasions. They lost an intermediate final to Ibrickane. I remember when I was over Corfin, we had many a great battle with them. So they're a real battle-hardened, team. And I would probably put them on par as favourites with Corfin for the championship. Whereas I think any of the other three teams will look at it and say, if we can come out of the group and get to a quarter final, you know, we might be able to sneak in the back door into semi-final, or if we can avoid a Corofin or a Kildysart, you know, and get in a run, that's the type of, I suppose, route that they're looking to take. But I suppose as the three teams go, you know, you'd have to put probably Kilfenora at the top of the three. We'll say North Clare teams on the back of, you know, they've a lot of lads, probably 26, 27, 28, that are experienced, that have kind of grown up together, played. They have a lot of intermediate football played, they have some senior football played. And like, you know, when you're a player like Keane O'Dea, you know, especially at intermediate level, it'll mean an awful lot, you know, and he's no different to Emmett McMahon from Kildysart or from Jamie Malone from Corofin. You know, Keane is going to lead the Kilfenora charge. A lot will depend, for Michael Cusic's, a lot's going to depend on, you know, how can they integrate maybe Donald McMahon back into their team, because, you know, he's been on the senior hurling panel and he's going to be a big player for them. Whereas, you know, for Liscannor, I think any of their older players, you know, be it, you know, Ronan Slattery or Alan Classy or, you know, any of those players that, you know, might be still knocking around, they're probably the wrong side of 30, you know, to be making the massive impact that they'd like to be making at the, you know, at the intermediate championship. So of the three remaining teams, I think Liscannor might struggle a little bit, but again, they've been punching above their weight and they've surprised a lot of people over the last 2 or 3 years, you know, and holding their own at intermediate.
Seamus, just on to Kildysart, and I suppose Kildysart are one of the local clubs around this area. We've been following their fortunes for a long time now. And maybe there's a tendency, a sort of sneaking sort of opinion going in that maybe Kildysart may have missed the boat in terms of their chance to get up to the senior championship, in terms of some of their players are getting on now, maybe the youth isn't still coming through. Are Kildysart as strong now as what they were maybe 2 years ago?
I would feel that they are. You know, they have a number of good young players coming through. Dermot O'Donnell, Seamus, Casey, you know, a few of those fellas have come through. Emmett McMahon, as you mentioned there, or as James mentioned, is a very talented footballer, and you know, they have the experience as well. But yes, they're raging hot favourites to top the group, but that can be a problem. You know, they're such hot favourites. You know, will it sneak into the mind that we're through anyhow? You know, it's a hard thing to manage, being such hot favourites, and they've been so close over the last couple of years, so they have to guard against that. And there's no doubting that they have talent in the squad, and there's no doubting, as James said there, that they're, I suppose, giant favourites for the title along with Corofin. But championship is championship, and over the last 10 years, I suppose, the intermediate championship has been particularly difficult to win. You know, and it has produced some great games, and it has produced a number of surprise results each year. So from that point of view, I think Kildysart have to be very wary. They have a new management this year, headed up by Noel O'Grady, very experienced man. You know, when it comes to football, Jack O'Cleary is with him and a number of others who have all. They have John O'Sullivan, Milltown-based John O'Sullivan, coaching the team. So they have an experienced backroom team, and I think that's an indication of how serious they're treating this championship. You know, that they feel that the time is right to get into the top flight, and there's many of their supporters feel that they will very much be at home at senior level. So, but they are the raging hot favourites, as I say, but they have to be very careful, you know, that they don't fall, you know, when least expected.
And James, just lastly, a two-pointed question on Kildysart. Firstly, do you think playing in the Cusack Cup and the number of games that they got in the Cusack Cup will benefit them, given that those Cusack Cup games are so close to championship? And also, do you think they've got the scars of last year's horrific first half showing against Corofin in Doonbeg out of their system? Because obviously it just, everything sort of fell apart in that first half. Now they got the ship together at half time and they mounted some bit of comeback, but all the damage was done in that first half.
No doubt, playing the battle-hardened senior teams in Division 1 of the Cusack Cup will definitely have helped them and prepared them for the championship. But like, I suppose I would see in an overall sense, those games, the league games, per se, and a lot, and the league for the first time in a while being over before the championship has started, they were pretty much glorified challenge games because a lot of players were missing from county squads, and lads were coming back from injury and stuff like that. So I suppose there's a double-edged sword with it. I suppose take with a grain of salt the results that they've got against those senior teams. But again, like anything else, they're better off playing that high quality of opposition. Now, as regards scars, they're probably scarred with the last 7 or 8 years, from semi-finals defeats. The closest that they would have came, and a lot of people, like again watching the final, I would have thought they were probably better than Brickens. When Brickens beat them in the final, and Brickens went on, to get them Munster Club final. Look at Brickens now. They're probably in the top 4 or 5 to win the championship at senior level. So they have a lot of scars, but I suppose like anything else, if you keep knocking at the door, sooner or later the door is going to fall. And why not this year for them? Because, and again, a lot of those young fellas coming through that they have at 2021, they've only maybe experienced the defeat maybe against they might even have made the team against Kilrush, might have been on the team against Brickens. So it doesn't go back that far for them. So I personally think the team that will beat Kildysart in this year's championship will win the intermediate championship.
Lads, I'll bring you on to Group 2 now, and we have probably the bookies' favourites and most people's favourites for the championship here. Corofin, they're in with Naveown, Coolmeen and Wolf Tones. But I always get the sneaky feeling, Seamus, that maybe Wolf Tones are dark horses this year in terms of this sort of championship. I know Corofin will go in hot favourites, but if you look at Naveown and Coolmeen, obviously Naveown and Coolmeen, Wolf Tones, they'll all sort of fancy their chances of taking out each other. But Wolf Tones put it up to Corofin last year in the intermediate championship, and they were sort of they got their act together in the second half of that campaign, and they have some promising youngsters coming through as well from minors and under 20 squads. So are Wolf Tones going to be the main opposition for Corofin in this group?
Well, on paper, it would look like that at the moment. Wolf Tones, I suppose, of the teams in the group, they're the one club that has experience of playing at senior level. It's not that long ago since they were relegated. So they have a lot of players who have experience playing senior football, which obviously will be an advantage. And as you say, they have a lot of good players coming through from underage. Like they qualified for the minor Division 2 final last year, a game that didn't get to be played because of COVID, and they have a few players coming out of that. And they have experienced players, but you'd wonder, how evenly balanced they might be. We'll say it's a difficult thing to manage, being a straight jewel club. An awful lot of players play both codes, and managing that, as we've seen with a lot of clubs, has proved difficult. So. That would be an issue for them, and with the senior hurling championship coming up, a lot of the same players involved. It's going to be difficult, to bring that together. But you'd expect that they would be the team most likely to qualify from that group, along with Corofin. But Coolmeen are a seasoned intermediate team. They've been there knocking on the door for quite a number of years. They haven't maybe had as many new young players coming through as they would wish for, and they're still depending hugely on the battle-hardened Cathal O'Connor to lead the way for them. But there's going to be a good battle. No more than the Group 1 that we've discussed there already. Corofin will be the hottest of favourites to top that group, and I suppose there'll be maybe a marginal nod for Wolf Tones to pick up the second spot. But neither Naveown or Coolmeen, they're not going to worry too much about that at this stage. They will go all out, and I think Coolmeen have Wolf Tones first, and that'll be a big game. If Coolmeen can cause problems for Naveown and in the opening round on Sunday, they will see themselves as in with a real good chance of getting through to the playoffs. So there's a huge amount to play for in that group, as I say, but Corofin on paper are the hot favourites to top the group.
And I suppose, James, in terms of Coolmeen, I suppose I remember being back there in 2020 and I back in Coolmeen, and I watched the league game between Cracklow and Coolmeen before COVID sort of came about. And I remember Coolmeen that day actually beat Cracklow in Division 3, and Cracklow had 1 or 2 players out. Obviously, then COVID struck. We didn't know we had this sort of pandemic, and the championship obviously went array for Coolmeen. It was not what they hoped at all. It was a bad sort of showing for them. So it's Mikey Hare's in charge now. He's probably there with that group now for a period of that transition time coming into a new club is probably over from him now. He's probably expecting a reaction from this group. Do you think he can get it, or with Coolmeen, is it just the depth of resources that in terms of the panel that it's just very sort of limited what he's working with?
I suppose, again, an experienced manager like Mikey, he's spent a number of years involved with Clonagad. So, I suppose dropping down the level isn't going to phase him. And I suppose from his own perspective, he'd be looking to try and get a tune out of Coolmeen. But as Seamus rightly pointed out, they're a battle-hardened, seasoned intermediate team that more often than not get the max out of themselves. I think if I'm right, David Neenan is probably 43 or 44, and he's still playing for them. And whether you're 17 in Coolmeen or whether you're 43 or 44, they seem, from the time that Martin Daly would have been over him and Jorkeen, they seem to be a very united group. And more often than not, and again, going back even to when Tommy Tuberty was involved, they try and get the max out of themselves. And, there's an opportunity probably there for them, no different to Group 1, in that they would probably see themselves on par with Wolf Tones, getting the better of Wolf Tones, and on par with Navan and getting the better of Navan. And again, once you come out of the group and you finish second in the group, and you might, and again, I suppose I alluded to earlier, I think Corofin and Kildice are the top 2 teams. But after that, there's an even spread of teams across the intermediate championship, and Coolmeen will fancy their chances on any given day to try and put their head above the pulpit and get to, be that maybe 3rd or 4th team, and no better man than Mikey Hare to try and get a tune on him.
And Seamus, in terms of Navan, I was just looking at the league fixtures for Navan. Coming into this championship, form is probably not on the side of Navan coming in. We know that they have real 2 prominent attackers in Conor Magner and Garrod Lynch, and sort of I suppose Navan, I feel they were going well into the intermediate championship for 1 or 2 years. They got that bounce after coming up from junior. Has that sort of bounce sort of evaded them now?
It's hard to know. I know they have a couple of serious injury problems. And I suppose, like a lot of clubs in the football world in Clare, they haven't huge numbers either. So, you lose a couple of your key players to injury, and you're struggling with numbers from then on, and that doesn't help anybody. And they're in that position at the moment now. Kilkee man Barry Hart is in charge there. He's an experienced man, has been through all levels of his own club. So he's a lot of work done there, and I expect that he'll get a bounce out of them this week. I genuinely do. Now they have a tough game against Corofin, without a doubt. But again, Corofin are the favourites, yes, but they're trying to maybe play 2 intermediate championships with basically the same panel of players, hurling and football. And we've seen with a lot of clubs, with the possible exception of Cratlow, who seem to be very well able to manage that. But we've seen with a lot of clubs how difficult that can be. And, they have a lot, Corofin have a lot of good young players coming through. But you need experience as well when you get to this level of football. It's all very well to have skill, etc., coming through, but you need experience. And if you don't have experience, it can cost you at times. So I expect Navan will make life difficult for Corofin. But at the end of the day, it will be a surprise if Corofin don't win that one.
And James, just on Corofin, I'm just looking there in terms of attackers. You could list them out. Garrod Cahill, Diarmuid Cahill, Jamie Malone. Now you have the likes of Killian McGrory coming up to that attacking scene. Killian O'Connor coming on to Robin Mounsey. I mean, that's 5 attackers maybe out of 6. They're all score getters. and guys that you would probably fancy to get scores even at a senior level. So we all talk about Milltown maybe having 4 real scoring forwards or 6. If you look across that Corofin forward line, they're not really dependent on Jamie Malone for scores in terms of, they have other guys there that are very capable of chipping in with 3-4 points across the board.
Definitely, and particularly with the younger lads coming through, and like I know a good few of them, would have played would have played in last year's championship and last year's county final defeat to Dora Bearfield. But I suppose my biggest fear with Corofin would be, and I know a lot of the lads very well there, is that the longer the championship goes on, the harder it's going to be. In that Seamus mentioned the dual thing, and they have a lot of young light footballers, and playing championship in August and even into the middle of September will be fine for them in the group stages. But I suppose when you go into maybe October and November, and a lot of those lads that you mentioned, they're like Dermot Cahill, he's like an Irish dancer on his feet, and Robin Mounsey again is quick, Kilmurry, they need, I suppose, maybe experienced lads, battle-hardened lads, to help those young lads out. I don't see any fear for them in the group, and I know they've changed manager this year in Colin Clancy, or Dougie Hurley has replaced Colin Clancy. So from that end, Dougie would know a lot of those young lads. Growing up, he would have had them at under 14, 16 minor, so he'll know them. He'll probably be best placed to get a tune out of them. That's my only fear for them. But again, they have class and abundance. Not alone up front, but kind of throughout the team.
And Seamus, lastly on Corofin, before I move on, they produced their best display last year in the semi-final, and it was a cracking display in the first half against Kildare. But they weren't able to bring that same tune into the final, and they were sort of flat on the day, many people felt, against Dora Bearfield and their supporters as well. So is it a case with Corofin that they peaked at the semi-final stage last year, and obviously confidence then they weren't able to replicate that that performance in the final? In terms of that sort of experience and having that experience psychologically, is that going to help them this year in terms of keeping them grounded?
Yeah, I'd have no doubt that it would. I suppose it's a very difficult thing for clubs or teams to produce their best form every day, and I suppose there's always a danger that things won't go well on a given day, and maybe that happened last year. And maybe a lot of pundits maybe mightn't have expected St. Joseph's to be as strong or as well organised as they were on the day. And then maybe a lot of lads forgot that St. Joseph's is a big parish with a big pick. They've had a lot of success at underage level in recent years. They've been very involved in the latter stages of a couple of minor championships, a couple of under 21 championships. And that talent came through, and I think that talent has been evident so far this year at senior level. That they have a lot of talent, and they are focusing big time on their football now in St. Joseph's. So maybe when we look back now and see, maybe we were all guilty of not giving them the credit that they were going to present a strong challenge, and maybe Corofin got caught a little on that, and Joseph's got the start that they needed, and it's very hard to. If you don't start well, it's very hard to get back into things, because any team that starts well the confidence grows and they start going well. So I think that Corofin maybe on that position this year, the players will realise that you must be ready for any challenge, whoever you're playing. And I think they're going to be well up for this championship, Corofin.
I'm going to move on to the final group now, Group 3. We've Shannon Gales, O'Curry's, Airwogue and the Banner. And I'm just looking at all the fixtures out of the round 1 in the Intermediate Championship. And if there was one game that I would pick to go and watch out of all these games, it would be Shannon Gales against O'Curry's. I'm finding this one very, very hard to call. Shannon Gales have been on an upward curve in recent years in terms of the league, in terms of the championship. An awful lot of promising youngsters. They seem to turn the corner. O'Curry's then were decent in last year's championship. Obviously, Ger Quinlan's back in charge this year, and their league form seems to be going well as well with Ger in sort of charge. So this has a making of a home sort of dinger, this sort of one. You got the feeling whoever loses this game still mightn't be technically out of the running in terms of this group. What do you think, James?
I suppose, to be honest, Jim, I disagree with you. The one game that I'd like to actually go and see is Éire Óg second team in the banner. You know, it's I suppose the you know, the new boys on the block after winning the Junior A Championship, and probably without Shane Meehan, arguably, you know, probably next to Jamie Malone and Emmett McMahon, maybe arguably the best footballer in the grade. They did it without him, and I think, you know, Éire Óg second team have probably been going well enough in the Cusack Cup, because they were down a lot of county players, and I think, you know, that has the makings of a real local derby. And you know, if the Banner were to get over that game, and I know I'm switching for a second, but if the Banner were to get over that game, you know, it could open up the championship for them, and probably error and do on, you know, as regards football in the town, and that you have another strong football team, you know, coming. But I suppose, you know, getting back to O'Curry's and Shannon Gales, again, both of them, they're both going to fancy their chances, Jim, of trying to make a semi-final. You know, there'll be a bit of shadow boxing, you know, to the quarter-final stage. The top two come out, and the two third-place teams. And again, Shannon Gales and O'Curry's will fancy themselves. If Kildyce and Corofin can end up on the same side of the draw, a bit like Dora Bearfield last year, they'll fancy themselves, you know, to get to a county final. And I don't think that, you know, losing the first game is going to be the be-all and end-all. They will both fancy their chances of beating Éire Óg and the Banner. But, you know, again, I have a sneaky feeling that the Banner are going to upset, you know, a couple of teams in that group on the back of they've played a Junior A final. You know, you can't beat a competitive game. You play all the challenge games and all the league games you want, you know, and they've only recently played a championship final. But that's going to stand them in good stead. And I would say of the three groups, it's the hardest group to call. And I think there'll be a surprise one.
Seamus, I suppose Dara Bohannon's form in the Clare jersey this year, he's probably his best form that I can remember him playing in the Clare jersey. In credit, Dara, he had a really good league, and he carried that onto the championship. And so I remember last year against Coolmeen in the quarter-final, he was playing in the full forward line himself and Tom Kelly, and they did awful rack that sort of day out. So the Shannon Gales have that option with Dara in terms of playing him in at 14 as well, and going a two-man inside sort of line as well. So it's going to be very interesting where Bohannon plays, because many people suspect, he's going to play around the middle of the park. But especially with these new mark rules and everything, that he provides a weapon that O'Curry's might find very hard to deal with.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think that they'll be able to afford to play there in the full forward line for that long, because if he's in there, you'll need the ball going into him, and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul by moving him in there, who's going to get the ball, you know, consistently enough to get it into him. There is a bit of rivalry there between these two teams. They met there a couple of weeks ago in the league, and O'Curry's won about 4 or 5 points. You know, O'Curry's are, of all the teams, they're a really battle-hardened team. You know, they come back with mostly the same squad every year for the last 10 years, and they're a very difficult opposition for anybody. You know, they were dealt a massive blow earlier this year with the tragic loss of Damien Kilmurry. And I think that'll be a driving force for them this year, you know, to win something this year, because he was such an outstanding clubman. From that point of view, when the draw was made, and I fully agree with James on this, when the draw was made, an awful lot of people went for these two straight away. I wouldn't rule out the other two in this group, coming out of this group, Éire Óg and the Banner. I saw that, as you did, the junior final, last year's junior final last week. I thought the Banner were particularly impressive. And they have one thing maybe that a lot of the teams in the Intermediate Championship don't have. They're a very youthful side. They have massive pace. Over half their team are under 20, you know, around 20-21 mark, which is a great boost for any team. And they're superbly able to play football. Now, Éire Óg could have a team that's capable of playing the senior championship, depending on who's available to them after the senior game this weekend. But they will have a lot of experience. It's a local derby. They won't want to be beaten. Éire Óg won't want to be beaten by the new kids on the block. So I think there'll be quite a big demand for tickets to get in to see that game on Sunday evening. So to me, it is the most exciting of the groups. all four will fancy their chances. And I think Shannon Gales will struggle a bit. A couple of weeks ago, they conceded walkovers in both their last round of the league for both their teams, citing injuries. But 2 weeks before the championship, I don't know if the club had that many injuries or whether they're just saving the players because they see how important this game is and they want to be fresh and want to have everybody ready. But there's nothing beats games and practice. And I think that they may have made a mistake in not fielding some kind of a team in their closing round of the league, of both our leagues. It's going to be a tight one, that one between the Gales and the Curries. I think our Curries might sneak it because they're battle hardened. But as James said, the meeting of Aero and the Banner could well prove to be the game of the opening round in this championship.
I suppose, lads, just to sort of wrap up our talk now on the Intermediate Championship, this feeling seems to be that Kildysart and Corofin, unless they meet each other, will make the semi-finals. I suppose if you to look at two other teams there, I'll just give my own opinion. I think if they don't meet each other, I just think it'll be Kildysart, Corofin, I say Wolf Tones and O'Curry's would be the four that I put down to make the semi-finals, provided if they don't meet each other. James, how do you sort of feel on that?
Well, I suppose I'd agree with 3 out of 4, Jim. Again, if Kildysart and Corofin can avoid each other, I think they're the two best teams in it. But again, it's all football. It's all football on a given day. I think O'Curry's this year, why they're a season campaign team, but like everything points to them for one last hurrah, in the sense of that Conlan has spent a number of years within his time and really I suppose learning his trade there, and he got them to a county final and they were on another day they could have beaten Milltown. So Jar has he has massive experience both as a player, as a manager. To get him back, driving back from we'll say from Clooney, training the team, and then with the loss of Damien earlier in the year, I think every fella that would have played football for O'Curry's and might have retired, I think everybody's probably putting the shoulder to the wheel there. And I think, again, depending on how the draw goes, and if Corofin and Kildysart, I think they could be the door of Airfield of last year, O'Curry's, and sneak maybe into a semi-final and into a county final, under the radar. As regards that third team, I wouldn't be as confident in saying that it's Wolf Tones. Again, it'll depend on the draw. I think you could throw a blanket over 4 or 5 teams. Personally, from a football perspective, I'd love to see it be the Banner, because as Seamus says, they're a young up and coming team, and again, it would be great for football in the town of Ennis, that if you had two clubs competing at a higher level on the football side of things. And I think from their perspective, they can only go on an upper curve, and what a lot of people have probably failed to realise is they've won that junior championship without Shane Meehan. And people all over the county rave about Shane Meehan as a hurler and as a footballer, and if he gets his hand right and he's available for them, I don't care who O'Curry's or Aerogue or Shannon Gales have in defence, they'll have their hands full there.
And Seamus, how do you sort of sum it out? Are you going along with Kildysart and Corofin, provided they don't meet each other, and who would be the other sort of two for you?
Well, I go along with Kildysart and Corofin, if they're focused, and I don't think they'll meet each other for a while, because if as expected that they top their groups, well, then they'll avoid each other to at least a semi-final. From that point of view, I agree with James. I think the experience and the cuteness that O'Curry's have gained over the years with Jar Conlan and battle hardened Denny McMahon in the backroom team there, I think that it's going to be hard to stop them. And if they get their act right this weekend and get off to a winning start, I think they'll qualify. I think that the Banner have an excellent chance. I think just Sunday's game is a key game for them, not so much because of who they're playing, but they obviously are on a high this week after winning the June Ray last week. It was a massive victory, and to get them, for the management to get them focused will be key, to get them back down to earth and ready for another game. If they're properly focused and going into Sunday's game, I fancy them to come out of that group, and I would think that they will trouble anybody. I was absolutely 100% impressed with their performance last week. You know, their pace, their movement of the ball, and you saw the game there. Yeah. They have some outstanding footballers, you know, and I think that I can see them getting to the knockout stage and troubling a lot of opposition.
Lads,
but finally, it has to be Corofin or Kildysart unless they go to sleep. One of them should win it.
Yeah. Lads, finally, on the Intermediate Championship, it's important to note this is a big year. As far as I'm aware, Seamus, 2 teams are getting relegated from the Intermediate Championship as well. Lads, I suppose with all the teams into the Intermediate Championship, in terms of all the teams want to go up, but no 2 teams want to go down from this as well. And especially there is a big gap developing between Junior A and Intermediate as well. So you obviously feel that for the 2 that go down, it could be a slippery slope. And well, I suppose Liscannor have shown that they've been able to survive the last few years. People will probably look at Rogue and say they're a second team. Maybe the lads will be depleted from their sort of first team in terms of picking sort of players. But could we see a shock this year aside, and maybe a big team or a big recognised team, or will it be one of the North Clare teams you feel that might fall through the trapdoor?
I think it's going to be very difficult to maybe say at this stage who might go down, but a lot will depend on this weekend's first round results. When a team loses, it's hard maybe to recover, and thoughts of relegation will enter the heads. And to keep the minds focused. Now, Liscannor have struggled in recent years, and with such a small pick, if you like, they would seem to be one of the candidates to be relegated this year. You know, the Coolmean, maybe unfortunately for them, might be another, you know, because they haven't a huge pick either, and they haven't had too many new young players coming through. It's very hard to pick who will finish bottom in that third group, where you have O'Curry's and the Gales and Rogue and the Banner. You know, the first round results there could provide a strong indication as to who might be trying to battle to avoid relegation there. But there will be a huge battle, and it's very hard to fight it off. Once relegation thoughts come into the mind, it's hard to fight them off, no matter how talented your squad might be, and it's hard to motivate lads just to train that bit harder. So the battle to avoid relegation could provide as much entertainment as the battle to win the championship, if you like. But you know, I think Liscannor, Coolmean are 2 of the teams that may, unfortunately for them, be battling to get out of that corner.
And James, do you start to share the same sort of sentiment? And how devastating would it be for our first team to make the plunge from Intermediate down to Junior A? We probably know there's a gap developing, and the Intermediate Championship since the reshaping has got much, much stronger in the last 3 years.
Most definitely. And I suppose looking at the 3 groups, Jim, I can only, you know, I could only probably put my house and say right now that Corofin and Kildysart are going to make the quarter-final. After that, you know, it's any one of the teams could qualify, but they could also be in a relegation dogfight. And if you look at, you know, the North Clare, there's a little mini group there in the North Clare in Group 1. You know, Old Tones, Coolmean and Navan, they'll all fancy their chances of coming out of the group. But if they end up in 4th place, they're in a relegation battle. And again, Rogue arguably probably have the strongest second team in a long time for most clubs as going competing at the intermediate level. They'll fancy their chances if they can hold their own. But at the same time, the loser of Shannon Gales and O'Curry's could be facing a slippery slope. So it's to be honest with you, it's very hard to call. Now, if you were to put me to the pin of my collar, you know, sadly, I would say, you know, the door has probably been knocking a long time on Liscannor. You know, and they've done well to keep their head above the pulpit. But I see them a little bit like Kilkee, that, you know, they might have to take a step or two backwards before they can take a step or two forwards. Because again, Kilkee, while they might have been some people's favourites to come up out of Junior A last year, they didn't. They were beaten in the semi-final by the Banner. So I would say, and I have a few friends in the scanner, but I wouldn't like saying I think they might be the ones, that might end up being relegated, because it's a long championship. It's going to be a long championship for the likes of those older players, and can they keep going to the well over 4, 5, 6 games?
And lastly, lads, you mentioned the Junior A, and we just have a minute sort of left there, and I just want to touch on it. Kilkee's form this year has been very good in the league. They've beaten a number of intermediate outfits as well. They seem to be going well. Ward is behind. They have a real high number of players training. They have a second team going this year. That second team has been going very well down in Division 7 as well. They're getting good numbers for that out as well. So Kilkee, I suppose, there seemed to a real sort of effort this year to make the step up back to Junior A, and obviously they will start as favourites. But I suppose Ballyvaughan will probably be reeling over that demoralising defeat. Obviously, they'll be contenders. The hurling will probably dictate where Clooney Quinn stand on that. But is there anyone else that you could throw into the barrel for that Junior A off the top of your head?
I would probably say Kilmurry, Jim. I think they've probably been unlucky a couple of years, maybe with with different draws. They have kind of probably reinvented themselves as a young team as well. They had the team for a couple of years there, a good number of years ago, and they've worked their way up through Junior B. They're a well-established Junior A team. They're a first team. It would mean a lot to them. No different to the football lads in Clooney Quinn to try and make that breakthrough. Outside of them, you have your typical, I suppose, second teams where that would be strong. In that Kilmurry always seem to knock a tune out of the Junior A Championship and get to semi-final and the odd county final. In a Steinman, with the amount of young fellas that they have coming through, they can't all play in the senior team. I think they could be dark horses, to get in the back door and maybe upset a couple of first teams. And again, I suppose Seamus won't like me saying it. I'd say Lissy Casey again. A lot of young fellas coming through, and depending on who they have and who they don't have as regards to their senior team, they could surprise one or two. But it's hard to look past maybe Kilkee, Ballyvaughan, and Kilmurry as first teams go. But don't be surprised if there's a second team in the county final.
And Seamus, your opinion on that? Lastly,
yeah, I'd add Doonbeg to the list. They won their league, Division 5 league. They have a good mix. They have a number of players like in the Dial and these fellas who have huge amounts of experience at senior level, who are concentrating on the junior this year. So I think they'd be in with a chance. But other than that, I'd agree with James, and I think it would be good for the game if somebody like Kilmurry, Ballyvaughan, one of these teams were to win it. Teams whose first team is playing at this level. I know a lot of the clubs at senior level or the second teams and senior clubs would have a lot of experience, and he's right. Like the Kilmurry in his time, and who have so many young players coming through, because of their success at minor level in recent years, and they would have a lot of players.
Seamus, with with Clooney Quinn, I suppose being in under 16 Division 2 finals, minor sort of Division 2, competing at a high level as well. If they were to sort of fell foul in the hurling championship, will they become? We all know some of those guys can play football and being in county squads. Will they, if the hurling doesn't go all right for them, will they come in as serious dark horses then maybe later on in the championship?
Yeah, that possibility exists, but. Right now, hurling is very much the number one in Clooney Quinn, and in the recent league, they conceded 3 walkovers rather than because they hadn't players, because their hurling management, by all accounts, just want the players focusing on the hurling. They still see they were in the county senior final there a couple of years ago, and they still feel they have the nucleus of that team and that they're capable of being winning a county senior championship, and they're focusing on that big time. So by the time that they would be out of the hurling championship, it would be down the line a bit, because it will be 4 to 6 weeks before we know who's gone and who's through to the knockout stage of the hurling championship. And by then, I would see the football, junior football championship in at the knockout stage. Now they're in a group of just 3 teams themselves. Milltown and Lissycasey are in the one group, so it mightn't be as difficult to qualify out of that group as maybe qualifying out of a 4-team group. They play Milltown in the first round of the junior championship, and they play Lissycasey after that. And I suppose Milltown and Lissycasey are likely to lose a player or two to their senior teams. Player or two that's eligible for junior at the moment. So, but I know what you're saying, that if they're out of the hurling, everybody becomes available for the football, and they have a lot of talented footballers out there. It's a parish that where the population has grown big time in recent years. As you know, go out there by Spencer Hill, go out by Clooney. There are an awful lot of new homes out there, an awful lot of new families in, which gives them a bigger pick. And they have people involved in football who have a football background. But if they get everybody, yes, they're quite capable of winning that championship. But I think that the focus is so much on hurling at the moment that it will be too late for them when they know whether or not they're going through in the hurling, and to start focusing on the football. So from that point of view, I don't think that they would be one of the likely winners this year. Now, by all, if they have their full pick, or if they all commit to football, yes, they would be very much in contention. But right now, I don't think that's going to happen.
Seamus, James, thanks for joining us this evening for a special intermediate championship preview, looking ahead to all the games this weekend in the first round. Just to repeat those matches for people just joining us: Kildare versus Michael Cusicks in Group 1, the Scanner versus Kilfenora also in Group 1. Then in Group 2, we've Corofin versus Naveown, Culmeen versus Wolf Tones, and in Group 3, Shannon Gales versus O'Curry's and Erogue versus Banner. No doubt a weekend of entertaining football. I would like to thank former Clare ladies football manager, currently involved with Kilmurry Ibrickane, James Murrihy. And I would also like to thank renowned Clare sports journalist Seamus Hayes for joining us this evening. That concludes our special RCB preview show of the Intermediate Football Championship. We do remember that the Intermediate Championship preview and the Senior Championship preview will be going out on our YouTube channel Friday night at 9 p.m. So do check that out. And this program will also be going out on RCB Radio Sports Show live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM. That's all for the evening. Good night. God bless. My name is Jim Conlan, and we look forward to a weekend of entertaining football. Take care.